Hey everybody, this video will teach you tips and tricks for working bottoms up and bottoms up simplified. I break it down into steps starting with the toe. So let's jump right in. Okay, let's start with the toe of bottoms up. I cast on the toe with Judy's Magic Cast On. I am working with one long circular needle here. You can also work with 2 double points. You're going to take your yarn and put it over your back needle, giving yourself a nice long tail and making sure that the tail comes to the back of that needle and the working yarn comes to the front of that needle. So you have 2 needles stacked right on top of each other. And now you're going to bring that back yarn and bring it over your thumb, and then take your working yarn and bring it over your index finger. So you're ending up with a little cross underneath you right there. And now what you're going to do is this really rhythmic motion. You're going to bring your index finger forward, bring the yarn over the front needle, in between those 2 needles and to the back, right where you started. Then you're going to bring your front yarn in between the 2 needles and over the back needle, and then back to where you started. So back yarn over the front, in between, front yarn in between and over the back. Back yarn over the front and in between, front yarn in between and over the back. And you're going to continue on like that until you have, this pattern calls for 9 stitches on each needle. You'll be ending with a stitch on the bottom needle. And now I've got 9 stitches on each of the 2 needles. I'm going to take the tail and wrap it around the working yarn. That's a very important step before you go to work across. Oh, I'm going to take that tail and twist it. I do things so fast. And now I'm going to turn the needles clockwise so that bottom needle is now on the top and I'm facing to the right with the needle tips. And now, since I'm on circular needles, I'm going to pull out this bottom needle. If you're on double pointed needles, what you would be doing is grabbing a 3rd needle right now. So I've pulled this needle out and I've got my cord right here, which is going to make it a little easier to work off those these stitches right here. And now I'm going to knit across these stitches. You might need to pull your tail tight right there at that first stitch just to keep yourself tidy. And I'm knitting across all 9 of those stitches. And now I'm going to turn my work and knit across these 9 stitches. So the top needle goes in and the bottom needle comes out because I'm working magic loop. At some point I'm probably going to switch over to double points, but for now I'm happy on my long circular needle. So now I'm knitting across those and I'm to the beginning of the round. The tail marks the beginning of your round. At some point, if you want to place a removable stitch marker or something else so that you know where the end of the round is for you, by all means go ahead and do that. For me, I know that if I have this tail hanging out right here, that tells me where my end of the round is. Just pushing that in, letting the camera focus beautifully. Oh, this yarn is very pretty and rainbowy and it makes me very happy. Okay, so now I am on setup round 2. I'm going to knit across the instep stitches. So let's go over this. If I've got my end of the round right here, this needle is the instep stitches. The first stitches on the needles, or the instep stitches. The second stitches are the sole stitches. So the first ones I'm knitting across are the instep stitches. That is also called the top of the foot, if that helps you out, instead of calling it the instep. And then I'm going to turn my work. And now I think in this video, to save time, I'm going to switch over to double pointed needles. So I am going to knit. See what this pattern says. It's always a good idea to read your pattern. I am going to knit one. I'm just going to pull that out to make that easier. And now I'm going to larynx. And to larynx, I'm going to go into this one stitch below the stitch on the left hand needle. I'm going to pick that up and put that on the needle without twisting it. And I'm going to go ahead and knit it. I'll show you that again. It's worked a few times in this pattern. And now I'm going to knit across those stitches. And I'm knitting to one stitch before the end, and I'm going to larynx. And for larynxing, I'm going to go to the third stitch down underneath on the right hand needle, pick up that stitch and work through it without twisting it. And now I'm going to knit that last stitch. I have finally learned with larynx and larynx to not have to read my pattern. I've learned that if it's a larynx, you're going to the stitches on the left hand needle, and if it's a larynx, you're going to the stitches on the right hand needle. So it's opposite. And that might click for you, or you might be like, Laura, that was too many words. I don't know about that. So I am at the start of round 3 now, and that means I am going to be adding my main color. And what I'm going to do is actually just move these stitches over to a double pointed needle and get rid of the circular needle, because it's going to make our life being my life, a little bit easier to show you the brioche stitches. Okay, so now we're ready to work set up round 3. I'm going to knit 2, and I'm working with the main color. And now I'm going to slip one yarn over, knit 3 times. To slip one yarn over, I bring my yarn to the front of my work. I slip the next stitch. I yarn over, just like that, to get my yarn to the back of the work. And then I knit 1. And I'm going to do that 3 times. And now I'm just going to knit to the end of the round. Now, setup round 4 has me working with the contrast color. It's much easier now that I switched to the double points to not have that cable bonking around everywhere. Setup round 4 has me first knitting 2. That we can do. Things get a little loose right there. You can just pull down on the tail of the main color to tighten things up. Now I'm going to brioche purl, slip one yarn over twice. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring my yarn to the front because I'm purling, and I'm going to purl that stitch and the yarn over I made over it together. And now I'm going to slip one yarn over. My yarn's already to the front, so that makes life easy. Brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, and now I am going to knit 3. Oh good, we get to do a larynx and a larynx again. So now I'm working on the sole stitches, and those just have increases happening at the edge. So here's let's make sure you're in focus so you guys can see. I'm picking up this leg right here. Let's get that all the way on here so you guys can really see that. Putting that onto the needle and knitting it. Pretty easy. And now I am going to knit across. And now I'm going to pick up this stitch right here. So it's the third stitch down on the right hand needle. And then I'm just going to knit into the back of that stitch. The goal is to not twist the La Rink and La Link. So however you pick them up, you want to work into them so they're not twisted. And then I'm going to knit that last stitch. Tidy that up. We're starting to see a tiny baby toe here. I want to kind of grab the sock for a second. Okay, I just want to show you where we are on the sock. We have literally worked right up to this stitch right there, and we're getting ready with row 1 to work our first increase line. So these are the instep stitches. You're working across them like this. And then these are the sole stitches, and you can see the La Rink right there, that beautiful line those make, and the La Link right here, and that beautiful line those make to make that shaping at the bottom of the foot. I think it helps sometimes to stop and see what you're doing, because this does not look a lot like what I just showed you, does it? It's going to, I promise. So now I am going to work again with the main color. This gets less and less fiddly once we have more stitches on to the needle. So now I'm going to knit 2. Let's make sure we're in focus, not grabbing a second color there. We only need to knit with 1 strand. So we're going to knit 2. And now I am going to slip 1 yarn over. So I bring my yarn to the front, slip that stitch, wrap the yarn over it. And now I'm going to brioche stitch BR3 stitch, which is basically a 2-stitch brioche increase. I'm going to go into these 2 stitches as if to knit them together. I'm going to knit 1. I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to go into them again. And when I say 2 stitches, they're not really 2 stitches. It's a stitch and it's slip 1 yarn over it. There we go. So I got 3 stitches on there. And now I'm going to slip 1 yarn over again. And I'm going to go into that stitch with it slip 1 yarn over. I am going to knit 1, yarn over, and brioche knit again into that same stitch. And now I am going to slip 1 yarn over, and now I am going to knit to the end of the round. If you have never worked brioche before, and this is intriguing, but you are not ready to start your first brioche project with a pair of socks on size 1 needles, I would suggest checking out my pattern Brioche Topper, which is an Aran weight brioche hat that will teach you how to knit brioche in the round on big stitches and big needles. There is an accompanying video for that pattern, which is really helpful. So if this is intriguing to you, but you want to back it up a little bit and try something else first, that's what I suggest doing. All right, guys, we made it through round 1. And now it is time, almost made it. That was like, I jinxed myself right there. Now it is time to work round 2 with a contrasting color. I want to work probably 2 or 3 more rounds with you guys. If you feel like you've already gotten it, I've actually shown you all the stitches you need to know for the toe, so you could skip ahead to the next part if you don't need to watch more. But for those of you this is new, I'm happy to keep continuing a little bit. So I'm on round 2. I'm working with a contrasting color. I'm going to knit 2. I'm going to brioche purl, so I bring my yarn to the front, work that stitch and it, slip one yarn over together, and now I am going to slip one yarn over and then purl one, and that's that yarn over from the brioche 3 stitch, and slip one yarn over and then brioche purl. That's actually the center stitch right there. Slip one yarn over, purl one. For those of you who've worked brioche before, I find this pattern really easy to see the brioche stitches in. Now I'm going to brioche purl and knit the last 2 stitches. And now I'm going to turn my work, slip that needle back, and I am working across the sole, and the sole is always the same. You're always going to knit one with the contrasting yarn. I'm going to pick up that stitch right there for a rink. I'm going to work a rink, and then I am going to knit across to the last stitch. So what you might see is that when it's a contrasting color round, that is the round that you have increases on the sole. And the way that the increases are happening on the top of the foot is with those brioche 3 stitches. There we go. My yarn's coming into the picture to the last stitch. Working a little rink. If you need to see the La Rink and La Link up closer, I actually have another video for that that just shows those stitches. So if you need a refresher on that, feel free to watch that video. Okay. That was round 2. And now we're on to round 3. See the little toe happening? It's so cute. So this is a main color row, which means it's a brioche knit row, not a brioche purl row. And I'm going to slip one yarn over, knit 2, slip one yarn over, knit 2, slip one yarn over, and that is the end. And now I'm just knitting to the end of this. So you can join me for round 4. Okay, here we are with round 4. I'm going to knit 2. I'm going to brioche purl, slip one yarn over, 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 brioche purl, and knit these last 2 stitches. And now I'm just going to work the sole as we've been working it with the La Rink and La Link. So continue on and work the toe for the size that you are making. And then you will be cutting, let me just bring the regular sock into view here. Once you're done with the toe, you'll be cutting your contrast color and not using that again until you get to the heel flap. And you're just going to work in the round without any increases until it's time to start working the gusset. And the goal here is when you get up to the point of starting the gusset, The gusset is about 4.5 inches long for the smaller size and 5 inches long for the larger size. So if you measure your foot and subtract a 1/2 inch, that's how long this portion should be. So for example, my foot is 9 inches long, so my entire length that I want is 8.5 inches, so it stretches a little bit about my foot. So I worked 4 inches up to here, and because it's 4.5 from here to here. So that's how I sized it for my foot. That should help you guys out as well. So let me go grab another sample and I will show you how the shaping on that gusset works. Okay, it is time to start working the gusset, and I have some bigger yarn, like a larger sample version. This is a bulky weight yarn, almost like, oh, I don't know, maybe a slipper version of bottoms up that I'm playing around with. Pretty fun, right? So I'm on circular needles right now, and I'm going to be working the gusset. You can do this on double points or magic loop, totally up to you. And I'm starting with round 1 of the gusset. The first thing that I'm going to do is get 2 stitch markers. Okay, I've got 2 stitch markers because I'm going to need one right after I work the first stitch and then at the end of the instep. So I am working across the instep right now, and I am going to larynx right away, which is maybe a tiny bit awkward because the larynx is going to happen underneath the last stitch of the round. So if I count 3 stitches down, I'm picking up this stitch right here and working into it without twisting it. Sorry, let me make sure we're in focus. Working into it without twisting it. And then I am going to place a marker. I got this fun little sheep marker. Nothing like a little black sheep. Lily loves a black sheep. And now I'm knitting this small, and what you're really doing is knitting across all of these stitches. So you're knitting the stitch count in your pattern. Since I'm working on a slipper version, my stitch count is different. And I'm already set up for the slipper. So I'm knitting across, I'm putting another marker, and then I am doing a larynx. Again, remember to look at your pattern to make sure you're casting on the right number. Just give me 1 sec, I gotta get this needle back. And then I'm gonna pick up there's my awkward larynx for the very beginning of that gusset. And now I'm just knitting across the sole. So the increases are happening at the top of the instep, and they are not happening on the sole at all. So this is the second part of round 1. Round 2 is just a knit round. So go ahead and work that, and then I'm going to show you round 3 because things get pretty obvious once you have those markers in place. Sorry that round 1 was a little funky to show you. I'm going to show you that one more time. I'm going to show you that one more time when I show you round 3. So now I'm just knitting across. Okay, now I'm at round 3. I'm going to knit to the marker, which is only 1 stitch right now because my gusset so far only has 1 stitch. I'm going to larynx, so I'm going to pick up that stitch right there and work it. And now I am going to knit to the end of the instep stitches, so the top Right here is the instep. I'm knitting across all of those instep stitches. And then I'm going to slip the marker. And now I am going to larynx. So I'm going to pick that up, put that on the needle and work it, just making sure that's not twisted, and then knit that last stitch. So now I've got 2 stitches for my gusset on each side. And these are my instep stitches, and these are my sole stitches. So you're going to continue on with the gusset until you have the correct number of gusset stitches for the size that you're making, and then we will turn the heel together. All right? Now it is time to turn the heel. So after you work your gusset, you're going to be working back and forth across the sole stitches, working fewer and fewer stitches with German short rows, turning the bottom of your heel. Ready to do that with me? Okay, so I have finished working the gusset. I'm working a larger gauge bottoms up than you guys, so I only needed 8 stitches for my gusset. I finished the gusset, I ended with a round 3, and I have actually already worked row 1 of the turning of the heel. I'm using the main color only for this still. So I knit to the end of the round, and now I'm just going to turn my work, and we are ready to work row 2 together. The first thing I'm going to do is slip one purlwise with yarn in front. And then I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to bring it up and over the right hand needle. Basically what that does is pull up the stitch from underneath, so it looks like you have 2 stitches on the needle, but that's really the legs of the stitch from underneath. And now I am going to purl all the way to the end of the sole stitches. So I'm working on the sole right now for turning the heel at the very bottom of the sock. And I'm just purling across. Okay, now I'm going to turn my work again. And I am going to slip one purlwise with yarn in front. And then I'm going to bring the yarn up and over the needle, pulling up that stitch again. And now I am going to knit to the double stitch, and you'll see what I mean by that the moment I get there. So I'm knitting to the double stitch. There's the double stitch. So I knit to there, and I am going to turn my work. And now I am going to slip that stitch purlwise with yarn in front, bring the yarn up and over the needle, and purl back to the double stitch on the other side. Now I'm going to continue doing that until I have the correct number of wrap stitches. on either side of the center stitches. I tell you in your pattern how many unwrapped stitches you should have and how many wrap stitches you'll have on each side. So give me a sec and I'll show you what you're gonna do next. Okay, now that we worked the heel turn, it's time for me to show you how to work the heel flap. The heel flap is worked with both the main color and the contrasting color, and it's got corrugated ribbing and brioche coming up the center. And there's a little trick that we're going to have to do to be able to work that heel flap. So I'm going to show you, again, I'm on a sample that has less stitches than your sock has on it. And the first things we need to do are work rows 1 and 2, which get us ready to start working with the contrast color for the heel flap. So the first thing we're going to do is slip one purlwise with yarn in front, bring the yarn up and over the needle, and now I am going to knit to 1 stitch before the end of this needle. You'll be working the stitch count in your pattern. Let's make sure we're in focus. When you get to those double stitches, you're going to work them together as 1 stitch, and that is basically hiding the short rows there. So these are German short rows that I worked. I have a video on working German short rows if you want to watch something that's a little bit more in depth and teaches you about them. I use them a lot in patterns because they're easy to write in and without having to have any extra information about how to work a short row. So I've worked to 1 stitch before the end of the row. That's a double stitch right there. And now I am going to work a slip slip knit with this stitch and then 1 stitch from the gusset over here on the other needle. So I'm going to slip those 2 stitches together knitwise, and now I'm just getting this stitch available so I can work it. And I'm going to slip that one knitwise as well, and then I'm going to work those 2 stitches together. So I just worked a slip slip knit on that end of the needle, and now I'm going to turn my work and I am going to slip 1 purlwise. Let's get in focus here, people. Slip 1 purlwise with the yarn in front, and now I am going to purl to 1 stitch before the end of these sole stitches. And when I get to these double stitches, I'm going to purl them together as 1 stitch. And now I'm at this purl 2 together, and just for this one, I've got to get this first stitch here ready to go. I think I'm going to end up putting those gusset stitches onto a double pointed needle. That's going to make life easier. I'm going to purl these 2 stitches together, and that is the end of row 2. And now, let me get this in focus. We're going to be working back and forth, working the heel flap on these stitches. My gusset stitches are over here, and we're going to be eating those up as we work them. I could either put them on double pointed needles, or the other thing I could do that I feel pretty good about is just to take those stitches and slide them over so that they're on this needle ready to work. If you're on double points, you'll probably rearrange them differently. I don't tell people in my sock patterns how to arrange their stitches because everybody has their own preference. But this way, I've got all of those stitches ready to work, and I'm working back and forth again. Okay, so I'm all set up, ready to go. I've got 7 stitches left here, 7 stitches left on the other side over there, and over on this side of the needle, the stitches that I'm not working are the instep stitches. So those are going to wait until I'm ready to work the cuff. So now I'm on row 3. The first thing I'm going to do is slip 1 purlwise with the yarn in back, and then the next stitch has me going to get my contrasting color. So the pattern that I'm following here is going to be a tiny bit different than what you're working for the size that you're making, but the concept is similar for the corrugated ribbing. So I'm knitting 2 with the contrasting color, and now I'm going to purl 1 with the main color, and now I'm going to knit 1 with the contrasting color. Got to make sure you don't use the tail. And I'm going to purl 1 with the main color, and then I am going to place a marker onto my right hand needle. And now, continuing with the main color, I'm going to knit 1, slip 1 yarn over, knit 1, slip 1 yarn over, knit 1. So that is 5 stitches that I've just worked right there. That is going to be the brioche that's at the center of the heel. So I need to work across these stitches with the contrasting color. So the pattern tells you to slip those 5 stitches back to the left hand needle. This was a bit of a brain teaser with this pattern, like how am I going to work brioche in the middle of a row and not have brioche going all the way across. And now I am going to slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over, brioche purl, and then slip 1 yarn over. And now I am going to place a marker so that I've got those brioche stitches really delineated by the markers. I just find that that's helpful to do. And now I am going to purl 1 with the main color, knit 1 with the contrast color, purl 1 with the main color, knit 1 with the contrast color, knit 2 with the contrast color, and now I am going to slip, slip, knit with the contrast color. And then I'm going to turn my work. I need to get rid of those. And now I'm ready to work back with row 4, but it is super important that I catch the main color with the contrast color. If I leave the main color hanging here and work back, I'm going to end up with this weird gap right here that we don't want. So it's pretty important to bring that over right there, pick up this contrast color, and then go to work back. So I'm going to purl 2 with the contrast color. I am going to knit 1 with the main color. I am going to purl 1 with the contrast color and knit 1 with the main color. And now I'm going to slip that marker and I'm working with the main color. I am going to brioche purl, slip 1 yarn over. Ooh, that got lost right there. We'll just pick that up. Easy peasy. That was a brioche mistake that I fixed here. Let me slow that down and show it to you. So I knew that I was supposed to brioche purl and that there should be a contrast color coming over the stitch right there. So I looked to the front and haha, he fell off. So all I did was pick up that yarn over and put it on, ready to work. Little brioche mistake fixing there. Brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl. And now I'm going to slip those 5 stitches back. Remember, those markers just help you know that you're at the brioche stitches in the center of the heel. Slipping those 5 stitches back. And now I am going to work slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, and now let's just keep going here. I'm going to knit and then purl, and then knit, and then purl 2, and then I'm going to purl 2, oh, splittiness, purl, purl. I'm going to tighten down with my tail right there if that gets funky. And now I'm going to purl 2 together, and that's decreasing off 1 stitch from the heel flap. And now I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to remember, I'm going to kind of turn to the inside so you can see this. Before I go back to work with the contrast color, I am going to take the working yarn and lay it over the contrast color. So when I pick this up to work back, the main color is caught right there, coming all the way to the edge, because that tightens up this little area right here. It's pretty important that you don't skip that. All right, so I slipped that stitch, and now I'm going to continue across. I'm on row 5. You'll just be using the markers to work up to and pattern. Basically, you're going to knit the knits and purl the purls with the color that they are already made in. And then you are going to work brioche across these stitches. So that's a brioche knit, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, slip one yarn over, brioche knit, and then you're going to slip those back. 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we are going to brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip one yarn over, brioche purl, slip one yarn over, slip that marker, purl, knit, purl. There you have it, you guys. Those are all the tricks I need to teach you for the heel flap. So go ahead and work your heel flap, and then you can come back and work the next section for joining into the round, going all the way around for the cuff, okay? Okay, we've worked the heel flap, and now it is time to work the cuff. You're going to want to switch over to smaller needles for the cuff, and that is because the brioche goes all the way around on the cuff, and brioche tends to be a little bit looser, so switching to the smaller needle will help tighten things up a little bit. You're going to see that what happens here is we have decreases happening up the side while we have increases happening in the center at the back of the sock. And that's how you get that lovely shaping right there. I love those lines so much. And at the same time, you'll be working brioche on the front. So let me show you how to do that. We're going to be employing a double pointed needle here that is going to help you working this side of the cuff. Again, I have this bigger sample that I'm working on. I really think I'm only going to need to show you around for you to understand what we're doing in this section. You're just going to be following your pattern as it is written. So the first thing we do here is a slip slip knit, and then knit one, and then I'll grab my main color. I'm working in pattern basically. Knit one, purl one. Now I'm going to continue in the brioche pattern for this first round. Now I'm going to slip those stitches back. And now I am going to grab my contrast color. Let's make sure we're in focus here. And I am going to work the brioche stitches again across. I've knit a few of these by now, and I gotta admit, I've got this pattern a tiny bit memorized. I think you'll find for your second sock that the first sock you're really concentrating, and the second sock is gonna go way more easily. That's what happened with the test knitters. Oh, purl. I was getting ready to do some brioche for you because I do love me some brioche. And now I'm just going to knit this one stitch because I'm working to the last two stitches on this one. And I am going to knit two together on those because I'm not turning my work. And now I'm going to come to the front of my work, and I'm going to be working brioche first with the main color and then with the contrast color across all of these stitches. But because I'm doing that, I am going to grab a double pointed needle and not work on my circular needle for these, but grab a double pointed needle and work with that instead. Okay, so let me just check my pattern. That's always smart to do. So I'm going to knit one, slip one yarn over, all the way to the end. And then the last stitch should be a knit one. Yay, it worked. And now, because I'm on a double pointed needle, I can just slide those stitches to the other side of the needle, grab my contrast color, and work across with that, because basically I need to do two passes for the brioche, right? Okay. And now I'm going to slip one yarn over and brioche purl. Let me get that needle out of the way so it's not being loud while we're working. Tried. Okay, that is the end of the setup round. You're now just going to follow your pattern as written, starting with round one, and you're going to be building out the decorative brioche section, starting with the center stitch right here, And as you have more brioche stitches on your needle right here, what you could do is work with a double pointed needle instead of with your circular needle. So you can just slide the stitches to the other point of the double pointed needle to work them with the contrasting yarn. This will become second nature for you once you dive into the pattern. It's exactly what I just did on the back over here. I cannot wait to see your bottoms up socks take shape. The only other thing that you have to learn in this pattern, if you haven't done it before, is a beaded bind off. I have a separate video for working with beads. That bind off is not hard, just work it exactly as it is written in the pattern. It is not necessary to work with beads. You don't have to use the beads if you don't want to. Remember, if you find working with the brioche stitches challenging, there is a simplified version of this pattern that uses a lot of the same skills. It just does not use the brioche, so it is definitely a simplified sock pattern if you would prefer to do that to the brioche version. I cannot wait to see your bottoms up. Post them, show them to me. Happy knitting, you guys.